Last season, I lost a lot of money, a pretty good bit of money, man, because I was my hernias and I couldn't work right. I couldn't perform. So this season here, man, I'm gonna see if I can't find me an assistant. A good assistant is someone that don't care getting in the water, ain't worried about the alligators, ain't worried about the snakes, and do anything that I tell them and take the cussing that I do.
You've got to love Shelby Stanga, right? The wild, adventurous swamp man from Axemen who could pull off the most insane logging feats with nothing but a chainsaw and pure grit. But what happened to Shelby after the cameras stopped rolling? Is he still out there, living the same crazy life we all grew to love? Let's take a closer look at the man behind the legend. Childhood struggles in the swamp. Long before the world knew him as the Swamp Man, Shelby Stanga was just a quiet boy growing up in the deep woods of Bedico, Louisiana. Life wasn't easy for him, and it definitely wasn't ordinary. Born in 1960, Shelby's childhood looked nothing like what most kids experience today. He didn't ride bikes through the suburbs or play ball in neatly trimmed yards. Instead, he found himself surrounded by murky waters, tall cypress trees, and silence. Lots of it. By the time Shelby was 9 years old, things took a sharp turn. His mother, concerned about racial tension and desegregation in their area, pulled him out of school. The Ku Klux Klan was active nearby, and she didn't feel it was safe for him to continue attending. Shelby once shared in a rare interview that his mother was tough but deeply protective. "She told me the world outside our woods wasn't ready for me, and I believed her," he said. With that decision, Shelby's formal education ended, but his real schooling was just beginning, in the swamp. While most kids his age were learning multiplication tables, Shelby was learning how to live with nature. He built his first raft out of driftwood and old rope, not because it was a fun project, but because he needed to get around. The swamp became both his classroom and his playground. He learned how to catch fish with his hands, track animals, and even build shelter. But he also learned about loneliness. You don't know quiet until you've spent a night alone up in a tree with nothing but frogs and gators below. Shelby once said, recalling his long hours perched high in the branches of old cypress trees, Shelby didn't just climb trees, he lived in them. Some days he would stay up there for hours, even days, making small platforms from branches and just sitting, listening to the world around him. There were no toys, no television, and no other kids around. It was just him and the swamp. "The trees were my people," he joked in one episode of The Legend of Shelby, the Swamp Man, though there was a hint of truth behind the humor. Those long hours gave him time to think and time to adapt. He became incredibly observant, noticing things most people would never see: the changing color of water, the movement of air before a storm, or the way animals behaved when danger was near. But it wasn't always peaceful. There were times he felt scared and unsure. Nights in the swamp could be especially cruel. The buzzing of mosquitoes never stopped, and the howls of unseen creatures often sent chills down his spine. He had no flashlight and no one to call if something went wrong. He learned to trust his instincts because out there, instincts meant survival. One night, a snake slithered into the tree where he was resting. "I didn't move, I just watched it," he later said. "It watched me back, then left. That's when I knew I could handle this life." Despite the isolation, Shelby found comfort in the natural world. He began to see the swamp not as something to fear, but as something sacred. It gave him freedom. He wasn't being told to sit still or follow rules. He was learning by doing, and he was doing things few kids ever would. He found old logs buried under water, figured out how to tie them to ropes, and practiced pulling them to shore. He didn't know it then, But those early experiments would lay the foundation for the career that would one day make him famous. Looking back, Shelby doesn't speak of regret. "I might not have had books, but I had the swamp, and the swamp taught me everything I needed," he said in a local interview years later. For him, those early struggles weren't just about surviving. They were about building the life he was meant to live. The loneliness, the danger, and the silence all shaped him into someone who didn't just work in the swamp. He became part of it. His childhood may have been far from normal, but that's exactly what made it powerful. It wasn't filled with comfort, but it was rich in lessons. For Shelby Stanga, the swamp wasn't a backdrop, it was the beginning of everything. Who would have thought that a boy who once hid in trees to escape the world would one day climb those same trees to drag out sunken logs worth thousands? The swamp hadn't just raised him, it trained him for a job no one else dared to do. Beginning of a logging career. Shelby Stanga wasn't like other 16-year-olds. While most teens were thinking about learning to drive or finding summer jobs, Shelby was already waist-deep in mud, sweat, and something more powerful: purpose. He didn't grow up with fancy equipment or a crew to guide him. What he had was instinct, grit, and years of learning how to read the swamp like a book most people couldn't even open. When he landed his first real job with a dredging company in New Orleans, it wasn't because he had a resume. It was because he knew how to get things done in places where machines got stuck and men got scared. That job wasn't glamorous. It meant long hours in the heat, battling mosquitoes, snakes, and sometimes even alligators. But Shelby didn't complain. He saw it as a way to do what he loved: work with the swamp, not against it. One day, the company sent Shelby out to remove a massive cypress log from the Tangipahoa River. That log had been buried underwater for years, too heavy and waterlogged for most to even touch. But Shelby looked at it like a challenge. He didn't have a crane or a winch. What he had was an old boat, some ropes, and a few patched-up inner tubes. He studied the current, figured out how to loop the ropes in just the right places, and used the inner tubes for flotation. After hours of pulling, adjusting, and thinking on his feet, he managed to bring that ancient tree to the surface. In an interview years later, Shelby laughed about it. "I didn't know I was starting a career," he said. "I just knew I could get that log out, and I didn't want to leave it behind." That log didn't just earn him a paycheck. It gave him something far more valuable: confidence. It proved that he could do what most people thought was impossible. Word started to spread. People began calling Shelby when they had sunken logs that needed rescuing. These weren't just old trees. Many were valuable hardwoods, buried deep for decades or even a century. He learned how to spot them, how to float them out, and how to stay safe in dangerous waters. He worked alone a lot of the time, just him and the swamp, but he wasn't lonely. "The swamp talks," he once said. "You just gotta learn to listen." What made Shelby different was his respect for the swamp. He never saw it as something to conquer. He treated it like a partner, something alive. That connection helped him avoid accidents, stay one step ahead of the dangers, and move through places where others wouldn't even try. He used homemade tools, taught himself how to work ropes underwater, and developed methods that most loggers had never seen. He wasn't copying anyone. He was inventing his own way. There were no rules, no manuals, and no backup plans. Just Shelby, the trees, and the water. And the work was hard. Sometimes he'd spend hours diving in cold, black water, trying to hook a chain to a log he could barely see. Other times, he'd be fighting to stay afloat while dragging thousands of pounds of wood behind him. Injuries were common: cuts, bruises, infections. But Shelby never backed down. "Every scar's got a story," he once said, pulling up his sleeve during an interview. "And every one of them means I came back." As the years went by, Shelby became a local legend. People started calling him the Swamp Man, even before TV ever found him. He wasn't chasing fame or fortune. He was just doing what he knew best, pulling forgotten giants out of the deep and bringing them back to life. His yard was filled with logs, each one with its own history, and he could tell you where every single one came from. His name started to travel beyond Louisiana. People in the logging world were curious. How was this man pulling out logs by hand that teams of professionals couldn't touch? That curiosity led to something unexpected: a knock on the door from a television crew. Rise to television fame. In 2008, a television crew from the survival show Man vs. Wild came to Louisiana. They were looking to shoot an episode in the swamps and needed someone who truly understood the land. Locals didn't hesitate. They all pointed to Shelby. The crew arrived expecting a guide. What they found was something more. Shelby didn't just guide people through the swamp. He lived it. He knew every sound, every ripple, every danger. During filming, Shelby wasn't trying to impress anyone. He cracked jokes, warned Bear Grylls about snake nests, and showed off his deep knowledge of swamp survival. When the episode aired, fans were instantly curious about the wild-looking man who seemed to be more in tune with nature than the host himself. One producer later said, "We knew right away he had something special." Shelby didn't need a script. He just needed space to be himself. That short appearance opened the door to something much bigger. The following year, the History Channel was preparing new episodes for Axemen, a show about logging across America. Most of their footage came from companies using big machines, hard hats, and walkie-talkies. But they were missing a piece of the puzzle: the men who worked in the forgotten parts of the world, where machines couldn't go. That's when Shelby got the call. When Axemen Season 3 aired in 2009, Shelby was a game-changer. He wasn't your usual logger. He didn't have a crew or big equipment. He worked mostly alone, using ropes, hooks, and homemade tools. What really caught people's attention wasn't just the work. It was the way Shelby talked, laughed, and brought the swamp to life. He shared old stories about ghosts in the trees, gators in the water, and lessons he'd learned by living close to nature. One fan wrote online, "He's like your crazy uncle who happens to be a genius at surviving in the wild." There was one scene that viewers never forgot. Shelby dove into black, swampy water to hook a chain around a sunken log. The water was freezing. No one could see anything below the surface. But Shelby came back up smiling, holding the chain in one hand and a twig in his teeth. The crew stood there speechless. "That log didn't want to move," Shelby said, "but I asked nice." That line alone turned into a fan favorite. As his fan base grew, the network saw something they couldn't ignore. Shelby wasn't just a supporting act. He had the kind of personality people tuned in for. So in 2013, the History Channel gave him his own spin-off: The Legend of Shelby the Swamp Man. This time, there were no other loggers, just Shelby, his dog, and the unpredictable world of the swamp. In this new show, viewers saw more than just logs. They saw Shelby trying to fix an engine using parts from an old lawnmower. They watched him get stuck in mud and laugh about it. They heard stories about his childhood, his mother, and the swamp legends that kept him company through the years. In one emotional moment, Shelby held up an old black-and-white photo of his mom. He stared at it and quietly said, "She told me I'd learn more in the swamp than I ever would in school. I think she was right." The show was a hit. It wasn't just a reality show, It felt like a visit to another world. But it wasn't fake or overproduced. It was Shelby's real life. He didn't try to become someone else. He still wore the same clothes, lived in the same area, and pulled logs with the same ropes. Fame didn't change him. He just kept living the only way he knew how. Honest, tough, and full of humor. In interviews, he stayed grounded. "TV didn't make me who I am," he said. "It just followed me around for a bit." That humility is what made fans love him even more. Shelby wasn't chasing fame. He just happened to be exactly what people were looking for in a world full of filters and fake smiles. Something real. Fame came with its own price. As much as the swamp had shaped Shelby, the world of television, expectations, and public life would test him in ways he never saw coming. Challenges and controversies. In 2014, just after his TV show gained popularity, Shelby's life took an unexpected turn. The world that had once embraced him with admiration now turned to focus on his legal troubles. It all started with an incident in 2011, a dispute with a neighbor over a cypress tree. Shelby was accused of cutting down the tree on his neighbor's property, leading to a felony theft charge. For a man who spent his life cutting down trees for a living, the irony wasn't lost on him. The case was complicated, and details surrounding the dispute remained murky. But what became clear was that Shelby's reputation was now on the line. For a man who had spent decades in the swamp, untouched by the limelight, this legal battle brought a new kind of attention, one that had nothing to do with logs or survival skills. Shelby stayed relatively quiet about the whole situation, never offering much detail to the press or the public. In interviews, he would shrug it off, saying, "I'm just trying to make a living, that's all." But despite his calm demeanor, the stress of being dragged through the legal system was palpable. "It's tough," he said during a rare interview. "When you're out there doing the hard work, you don't expect people to question your character. But sometimes, life throws you a curveball." The incident not only brought legal challenges, but also fueled a wave of controversy. Fans who once admired him began to question the man they had watched on television. Was he the hero of the swamp, or just another man caught up in a dispute? The case dragged on, and even though the charges were eventually dropped, the cloud of suspicion lingered. Shelby's quiet, no-nonsense approach to life didn't mesh well with the world of media speculation. He didn't offer many explanations, and that only made people more curious. While some fans stood by him, others found themselves questioning what had really happened. The battle wasn't just legal, it was public, and it was personal. But Shelby's challenges didn't stop there. The pressure from his newfound fame began to take its toll in other ways. When a man spends most of his life working in isolation, the glare of TV lights and the constant scrutiny of the public can become suffocating. Shelby had never been one to chase fame. He was just doing what he loved, pulling logs from the swamp and sharing his skills with a world that didn't know much about the backwaters of Louisiana. Yet, when the spotlight came, it wasn't always as welcoming as it seemed. As the demands of his career grew, so did the pressure to perform, to be the larger-than-life character fans had come to adore. Shelby, however, was a man of few words and even fewer appearances. He wasn't the type to show up at public events or promote his brand. For him, it was all about the work. But TV didn't always let you hide behind the work. Producers wanted more. Fans wanted more. The pressure to stay in character, to keep up the persona of the Swamp Man, became a challenge that even Shelby couldn't ignore. He often joked in interviews that the toughest part of fame wasn't the fame itself, it was keeping up with people's expectations of who you should be. But for Shelby, the real difficulty wasn't the world outside, it was the struggle within. The personal toll of fame crept in slowly, affecting his home life and relationships. Shelby had always been a man of the swamp, of hard work and solitude. He was used to being alone with his thoughts, living by his own rules. But as his TV career took off, he found himself living in a different world. The disconnect between the quiet life he knew and the demands of the public world grew wider. Those closest to him saw the toll it was taking. In interviews, Shelby's voice would sometimes crack when talking about the strain it had put on his personal life. "It's hard when you're not in control of the story," he once said. "You're just out there, doing your thing, but people are writing it for you." Despite the challenges, Shelby never stopped working. He remained rooted in his values, loyalty, hard work, and authenticity. But the pressure of fame, the controversies, and the legal battles were all pieces of a larger puzzle. Shelby often found himself questioning whether the attention was worth the cost. "I never asked for this," he said in one interview, "but I'm doing my best to take it all in stride." That's the thing about Shelby Stanga. No matter the challenges, no matter the controversies, he faced everything with the same determination he'd learned from the swamp. The world may have misunderstood him, misjudged him, and questioned him, but he never let it break him. While he thrived in the wild, navigating through the roughest waters, his personal life was often the calm he couldn't quite find. Beneath the public persona and the tough exterior, there were battles fought away from the cameras, battles that would test the very foundation of his marriage and the man he had become. Personal life struggles. Shelby was married to Donna Stanga, a woman who, in many ways, was his equal. Donna was strong, independent, and, like Shelby, deeply connected to her roots. She was a Jehovah's Witness, which shaped much of their life together. Their relationship, though full of love, was also shaped by differences in their beliefs and lifestyles. Shelby, the rugged and free-spirited man of the swamp, wasn't always in sync with Donna's more reserved and structured approach to life. Yet, their differences didn't pull them apart. They seemed to complement each other in ways that helped them grow. "Shelby's not the easiest man to live with," Donna once said in an interview, "but I love him. We balance each other out." Donna's calm demeanor was a grounding force for Shelby. While he lived life on his terms, often choosing solitude and wild adventures over conventional routines, Donna provided the stability and structure he didn't even know he needed. She kept their home running smoothly and ensured their 2 children were raised with love, discipline, and strong values. But even with their balance, life wasn't always smooth. Shelby's fame and the demands of his television career put a strain on their marriage. The quiet man who had spent years away from the spotlight was now constantly under public scrutiny. The attention that came with fame wasn't something Shelby had anticipated, and it wasn't always easy to handle. In interviews, Shelby admitted that his work in the swamp had always been solitary. He never expected that the world would be watching, judging, or even expecting him to behave a certain way. "I'm not used to all the noise," Shelby explained in one interview. "The swamp's quiet, you know? It's where I think best. But suddenly, everyone's got an opinion about you, about how you should act or talk. It's a lot." While Shelby was adjusting to his newfound fame, Donna often found herself shouldering the burden of keeping their home life intact. Though Donna rarely appeared on camera, she did show up occasionally to help with various tasks on the show. In one memorable episode, she assisted Shelby with a logging project, showcasing her own skills in the swamp environment. The audience was surprised to see Donna's strength and expertise in the wild. It was clear that she wasn't just a quiet supporter behind the scenes. She was a partner in every sense of the word. Yet, despite her occasional television appearances, Donna remained fiercely private about her personal life. "We do what we do for ourselves, not for anyone else," she said, when asked about her role on the show. Shelby, too, tried to keep his personal life out of the public eye. But as his career soared, it became harder to separate the man from the legend. Fans wanted more. They wanted to know about his home life, his marriage, and his family. And while Shelby didn't mind sharing snippets of his world with his audience, it was clear that the pressure was beginning to take its toll on him and Donna. "We've been through a lot," Shelby once said, his voice softer than usual. "People think TV is all fun and games, but it's tough on your family. Donna and I have had our ups and downs, like any couple, but we always come back to each other." Despite the challenges, Shelby's love for his wife and children was evident. He often spoke of how Donna kept him grounded. "She's the one who makes sure I don't go too far off the deep end," he laughed. "Without her, I'd probably still be living in a shack in the swamp somewhere, talking to the gators." Their 2 children, who were largely kept out of the public eye, were also a central part of Shelby's world. Though he didn't go into detail about his family life, it was clear that Shelby's role as a father was one he took seriously. "Being a father is something I don't take lightly," he said. "I want my kids to grow up knowing the swamp, but I also want them to have something more, something outside of all this." In one of his more candid moments, Shelby shared, "Marriage is a lot like the swamp. Sometimes it's calm and beautiful, and other times it's muddy and full of surprises. But if you work together, you can get through anything." Through it all, Shelby remained a family man at heart. The world may have watched his every move on television, but the swamp was where he found peace. And though his personal life faced its struggles, Shelby Stanga never stopped fighting for what mattered most: his family, his roots, and the swamp that had always been his home. Life beyond the spotlight. Even after Shelby Stanga's rise to fame on shows like Axemen and his own spin-off, The Legend of Shelby, the Swamp Man, he remained unchanged in many ways. The TV lights might have faded, and the camera crews left the swamps of Louisiana, but Shelby's connection to the land he loved never wavered. Unlike many in the entertainment industry, Shelby wasn't interested in the trappings of fame or fortune. He didn't need the luxuries that came with being a reality TV star. For Shelby, it had always been about the swamp, the people he cared about, and the peace he found in his work. "People think I'm a celebrity," Shelby said with a laugh in one interview. "But the truth is, I'm just a guy who loves the swamp. Fame never really changed me. I've always been the same guy, the one who's happiest when I'm out in the wild." Shelby's humble attitude towards his fame was evident in his everyday life. While the world may have known him as the wild man of the swamp, he was just as comfortable living a quiet life with his family near Lake Pontchartrain. His modest home, tucked away from the spotlight, reflected his values: hard work, simplicity, and an unwavering respect for nature. For Shelby, the swamp wasn't just a place, it was a way of life. He didn't see logging as just a job, but as a connection to his roots. It was something he had learned from an early age, something that defined him more than any television show ever could. "I don't do this for anyone else. I do it for me," Shelby explained with a quiet pride. "It's in my blood, always has been." Even when the cameras weren't rolling, Shelby found ways to keep his passion for the swamp alive. He spent countless hours outdoors, guiding those who wanted to learn about swamp life or simply experience it for themselves. Whether it was taking a group out on a fishing trip or teaching someone how to fell a tree, Shelby was always eager to share his knowledge. For him, it wasn't about the fame or recognition. It was about giving others a taste of the world he had come to love so deeply. In many ways, Shelby had become a living legend. His unique skills and rugged charm had earned him a place in reality TV history. But despite the fame, he never lost sight of what was most important to him. His family, his land, and his work in the swamp remained at the center of his world. "TV's a fun ride," he said, "but when it's over, you go back to what really matters." And for me, that's always been the swamp. Shelby's legacy, though not one marked by awards or widespread fame, was rooted in authenticity and respect. Fans admired him not because of the persona he projected, but because of the man he truly was. He had never tried to be something he wasn't, and people respected him for that. Whether on television or behind the scenes, Shelby remained true to his roots and to the way of life he had always known. "I don't need to be famous," Shelby explained in an interview a few years after his TV career wound down. "I just want to do the work, live my life, and leave a mark on the people who matter to me. If someone remembers me as a guy who loved the swamp and respected the land, that's enough for me." What do you think about Shelby's life and his way of navigating both fame and personal struggles? Share your thoughts in the comments below.